Imagine boarding a massive Boeing 777. You walk down the aisle, expecting to fight for overhead bin space, but as you look around, you realize something unsettling. You are the only person on board. Actually, let's take you out of the picture entirely. There is nobody in the cabin, just the pilots, thousands of gallons of highly flammable jet fuel, and thin air. This isn't a glitch in the matrix. This isn't a specialized test flight or a cargo run. Right now, as you watch this video, major airlines around the world are deliberately flying thousands of completely empty planes across the globe. They are called ghost flights. They are burning millions of dollars. They are pumping massive amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere for absolutely no one. And the craziest part? The airlines hate doing it. They are begging to stop, but they are forced to. If they cancel these empty flights, it could destroy their entire business model overnight. Today, we're diving into the bizarre, highly secretive, and trillion-dollar loophole of the global aviation industry. To understand why airlines are legally required to waste massive amounts of money and destroy the environment in the process, we have to talk about the most valuable invisible real estate on planet Earth. When you look at an airport, you see runways, terminals, and control towers, but airlines see something else: slots. An airport slot is essentially a strict reservation. It is the legal permission given by an airport coordinator for an airline to use the full range of airport infrastructure, the runway, the gates, the baggage handlers, at a very specific date and time. In massive, congested hubs like London Heathrow, Frankfurt, or JFK, you can't just fly a plane in whenever you want. The sky is full. The runways are packed. Because these mega hubs are operating at 100% capacity, acquiring a new slot is almost impossible. They are rarer than diamonds. And because they are rare, they are incredibly expensive. In 2016, Oman Air wanted a prime early morning landing slot at London Heathrow. To get it, they had to buy it from Air France KLM. The price for that single, invisible time slot? A record-breaking $75 million. Let that sink in. $75 million just for the right to land an airplane at a specific hour. For legacy airlines like British Airways, Lufthansa, or Delta, their portfolios of slots at major airports are literally worth billions of dollars. Sometimes the slots an airline owns are worth more than the actual airplanes they fly. But there is a catch, a massive, terrifying catch that keeps airline CEOs awake at night, and it's called the use it or lose it rule. Aviation authorities, like the FAA in the US and the European Commission in Europe, want to make sure that these incredibly valuable slots are actually being used. They don't want a massive airline hoarding slots just to keep smaller competitors out of the market. So they created a global standard known as the 80-20 rule. The rule is brutally simple. An airline must fly at least 80% of its allocated slots over a season. If they fly 79%, they lose the slot. It gets taken away and handed over to a rival airline forever. Under normal circumstances, this rule makes perfect sense. It forces efficiency. If people are buying tickets, you fly the plane. If you can't fill the plane, you shouldn't hold the slot. Simple, right? But aviation is entirely dependent on predictability, and predictability is exactly what vanished a few years ago. When global travel stopped, airlines panicked. Nobody was flying. If the 80-20 rule remained in effect, airlines would have been forced to fly completely empty planes just to keep their multi-million-dollar slots. Recognizing the absurdity of this, governments temporarily suspended the rule. They granted a slot waiver. Airlines could ground their fleets without losing their precious real estate. But as the world slowly reopened, the waivers expired. The European Union, eager to get the economy moving again, brought the slot rules back. first at 50%, then ramping back up toward the standard 80%. There was just one massive problem. The bureaucrats brought the rules back, but the passengers hadn't returned yet, especially on business routes and international flights. Airlines were caught in a nightmare scenario. They had to fly to maintain their slots, but there was no one to buy the tickets. What did they do? They did the only thing that made financial sense. They flew empty. In early 2022, the CEO of Lufthansa Group, Carstens Foer, dropped a bombshell in an interview. He revealed that because of the EU's strict slot rules, Lufthansa alone would have to fly 18,000 unnecessary, nearly empty flights just to secure their takeoff and landing rights. 18,000 flights. That's roughly 50 flights a day, every single day for a year, carrying ghosts. Now let's talk about the dark side of this equation, the environmental cost. Aviation is already one of the hardest industries to decarbonize. It accounts for about 2.5% of global CO2 emissions, and every single airline currently has PR campaigns promising to reach net zero by 2050. They charge you extra for carbon offsets, they give you paper cups instead of plastic, and they proudly boast about their eco-friendly initiatives. Yet, due to this bureaucratic loophole, they are engaging in the most anti-environmental practice imaginable. Let's do the math. A typical short-haul flight in Europe, say from Frankfurt to London, burns roughly 3,000 to 4,000 liters of aviation fuel. If we take Lufthansa's 18,000 ghost flights as a baseline, we're talking about roughly 60 million liters of jet fuel burned for absolutely zero economic or societal benefit. That is enough fuel to fill dozens of Olympic-sized swimming pools. It translates to hundreds of thousands of tons of completely avoidable greenhouse gases pumped directly into the upper atmosphere. Climate activists were furious. Greta Thunberg tweeted about it. Politicians held emergency meetings. The public outrage was palpable. How could governments, who constantly lecture citizens about their carbon footprints, mandate a system that forces corporations to actively pollute the planet just to keep a space in a spreadsheet? The airlines pointed their fingers at the regulators. The regulators pointed their fingers back at the airlines, claiming the airlines could just hand back the slots if they didn't want to fly them. But asking an airline to voluntarily surrender a $50 million asset to a competitor is like asking a bank to leave its vault unlocked and the door wide open. It's corporate suicide. So who is actually the villain here? The truth is, it's a failure of the entire system. Legacy airlines love to complain about ghost flights when it suits them, but behind closed doors, they fiercely defend the slot system. Why? Because the grandfather rights of the slot system protect them from competition. If you're British Airways at Heathrow, you own over 50% of the slots. You don't want a new, cheaper airline coming in and stealing your market share. On the other side, ultra-low-cost carriers like Ryanair and Wizz Air have a completely different perspective. When legacy airlines cried about having to fly empty planes, the CEO of Ryanair famously responded, "If you can't fill the planes, sell cheaper tickets, or hand the slots over to us, and we will." The budget airlines argue that legacy carriers are just whining. They argue that ghost flights only exist because legacy carriers refuse to lower their ticket prices to stimulate demand, preferring to burn fuel and complain rather than lose their precious monopoly at mega hubs. It's a vicious game of corporate chess played at 35,000 feet, with the environment paying the ultimate price. And the problem isn't just a pandemic hangover. Even today, ghost flights happen. Sometimes an airline will fly an empty plane just to keep the crew certified. Sometimes a plane is flown empty to be repositioned for a busy route the next morning. But the core issue, the terrifying inefficiency of the use it or lose it rule, remains largely unchanged. So how do we fix a broken trillion-dollar system? Some economists suggest a free market approach, auctioning off all airport slots every 5 years. This would force airlines to be constantly efficient, but it would also cause chaos in scheduling and likely bankrupt older airlines. Others suggest environmental waivers, where airlines can cancel flights without penalty if they can prove the flight is environmentally unjustifiable. But regulators fear airlines would abuse this to artificially restrict supply and drive up ticket prices. Until a global consensus is reached, the ghost flights will continue. The next time you look up into the night sky and see the blinking lights of a passenger jet cruising silently among the stars, there is a very real chance that inside that metal tube there are no passengers reading books, there are no babies crying, there are no flight attendants serving coffee. Just a pilot, a co-pilot, and an invisible multi-million-dollar spreadsheet soaring through the dark. If you want to dive deeper into the hidden systems that run our world, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, should airlines be heavily fined for flying empty, or should the governments change the rules?